Well, it might be a good idea to share cars, but there are some things people don't want to share. 2 weeks ago, the now famous left shark almost took the limelight from Katy Perry during the US Super Bowl's halftime show. Well, Left Shark couldn't dance, and that was the fun part of it all. A 3D printer designer began selling the plans that let anybody make their own Left Shark on a 3D printer with no royalties to Katy Perry, and her lawyers were on the phone the next day. How close is 3D printing then coming to the point at which you could make your own Left Shark or anything else? Well, closer than you might think, thanks to some people who want to be right in the middle of the 3D printing business.
In this office in northeast Shanghai, they are using 3D printing technology to make 100 customized masks for an artist's exhibition. Each mask copies a different person's face, and so has its own proportions and sizes. It would take 2 weeks to carve one with traditional methods, but with 3D printing technology, it takes only 10 hours.
所以用传统的办法来做的话，整个周期就非常长，需要把100个人的脸部采集下来，脸部信息采集下来，然后通过这种传统的开模或者是 CNC 雕刻的方式去制造这个面具。那么现在呢，通过 3D 打印的技术，就可以在24小时之内做出这样的面具。
That is, if you have the right software to do it. There are 3 steps to 3D printing. Scan the data, make any changes or corrections, and then slice the computer model into as many layers as you can, each one to be printed out later. The problem is, there are just too many ways to do all that. There are more than 100 3D printer makers in China, and the slicing software alone comes in at least a dozen varieties, many of which will work with only a few printers. There are no standards, and nothing will talk to anything else.
都是定制化，所以全世界有多少家 3D 打印公司，就有多少套那个软件系统。因为没有标准化，所以呢，相互不兼容。你去买来的东西，万一需要换一个系统的话，它都是没办法换的，就整套软硬件要从此换掉，成本也比较高。
So wouldn't it be nice if there were one system that all these different bits could use to talk to one another? Well, it turns out there now is such a system. One of the world's biggest modeling software companies, Autodesk of the US, has launched an operating system called Spark. It could be what the 3D printing business has been waiting for.
There was a recent industry report that said about between 35 and 75% of 3D prints fail. So, you don't have a very high success rate of getting 3D objects to print out. So we saw that as the place where we could make a difference, and that's why we created Spark, was to build a software layer that made 3D printing easier and more reliable.
Autodesk wants the Spark system to do for 3D printing just what Android did for mobile telephones. Create an open system that any designer can use freely and that will let any part of any 3D printing system communicate with any other part. Spark is free and targeted at software designers, printer manufacturers, and 3D product designers. Companies like Panowin are excited about it because it will let more people use their printers without running into software incompatibilities.
那么在推出Spark平台之后，盘文科技的 3D 打印机可以很顺利地接入到这个平台中去，那么可以让更多的人很方便地应用各种软件来使用盘文科技的 3D 打印机，做制造做分布式的制造。那么未来甚至我们可以做远程的互联网的分布式的制造。
Autodesk won't say how much money it has invested in Spark, but it has announced a $100 million fund to help develop the 3D printing industry. So, how will Spark make a profit? Keep in mind that while Autodesk calls Spark the Android of 3D printing, we all know that Android has never made much money for its creator, Google.
In terms of, I think, business profitability for us for doing something like Spark, Google was, I'm not sure their strategic reasons, and we look at Android as an example only because it was a software layer that lived on top of a device, which is sort of what we're trying to do with Spark as well. But for us, making money is pretty clear. We get to sell more 3D design software.
And that is when Autodesk expects Spark to start making money. While the Spark platform itself is free, high-end professional add-ons to it will not be. So the hope is that it will be a win-win business for both Autodesk and other 3D printing companies which run their software on Spark. So far, Autodesk has got many big names in the industry signed up to work with Spark, including HP. However that works out, since Spark is free and solves compatibility issues, the industry expects a faster rollout and a quick development. One industry insider says that as the Spark community matures, it will help cultivate better business models and bring more profit to not only hardware and software makers, but also to modeling designers.
因为现在3D打印公司里边很多的那个产业链里边，现在主要的是卖3D打印机，还有呢卖3D打印材料，这几样东西，这两个是硬碰硬挣钱的。但后面应该挣钱的最多的挣钱部分，就是说我设计一个产品，最后你在远端打印的时候付我钱，这是一个颠覆工业啊，我们想看到的商业模式。
Just as what has happened with Android and the mobile phone industry, the fact the Spark is an open-source platform means there will be no entry barrier for companies wanting to join the industry. Some people worry that lots of low-end and similar products will make the Spark platform unwelcome at the high end of the 3D printing business.
这个问题就是像手机行业一样，安卓有安卓的市场，那苹果有苹果的市场。 其实一个是精品路线，一个走大众化路线，但是真正要做精品的公司不会走这条路，因为这里面所说的，它里面会有病毒的侵入，会有质量不统一，然后还会有那个版本的问题。
So there will be some problems ahead, and copyright protection is not the least of them. But if everything comes together, Spark could be moving 3D printing closer to your living room. Only Katy Perry's lawyers know whether that will happen soon enough to please all those fans of Left Shark.